The moment you hear your recorded voice for the first time, a peculiar sense of alienation often sets in. It sounds different, unfamiliar, sometimes even a little bit annoying. This isn't just a subjective preference, it's a fundamental difference in how we perceive sound. When you speak, the sound waves travel through the air to your ears, but simultaneously, your vocal cords and the bones in your head vibrate, conducting sound directly to your inner ear. This internal conduction path significantly alters the frequencies you hear, particularly boosting lower frequencies. This phenomenon, known as bone conduction, essentially acts as a built-in bass boost for your own voice. The sound you hear coming out of your mouth is a rich, deeper version compared to what others hear, or what a microphone captures. Imagine listening to music through a high-quality subwoofer directly attached to your skull. That's somewhat analogous to the effect bone conduction has on your perception of your own voice. When a recording plays back your voice, it bypasses this internal pathway entirely. The sound waves travel purely through the air, just as they would for anyone else listening to you. This means the recording lacks that familiar low-frequency boost, presenting you with a thinner, higher-pitched version of yourself. It's like hearing a track without its bass line, recognizable but fundamentally altered and often less satisfying. This discrepancy between the internal and external sound of your voice creates a perceptual shock because the recorded sound doesn't match the internal model you've built over a lifetime of speaking and listening to yourself through bone conduction. Beyond the physical mechanics of bone conduction, there's a psychological component to our discomfort with our recorded voice, often described as an auditory uncanny valley. We have a deeply ingrained internal image, a mental blueprint of what we sound like. This blueprint isn't just about pitch and timbre. It's intricately linked to our self-identity and how we project ourselves to the world. When a recording presents us with a voice that is similar but not identical to our internal model, it triggers a sense of unease, a feeling that something is off. It's akin to seeing a highly realistic robot that is almost human but falls short in subtle ways, leading to revulsion rather than acceptance. Our brains are incredibly adept at recognizing deviations from expected patterns, especially when those patterns relate to our own identity. This auditory uncanny valley effect is amplified because our voice is such a fundamental part of our self-expression. It's the primary instrument through which we communicate our thoughts, emotions, and personality. To hear it distorted or different from what we expect can feel like a direct challenge to our self-perception, almost as if an imposter is speaking in our place. This isn't just vanity, it's a cognitive dissonance where the external sensory input clashes with the internal schema. This disjuncture can evoke feelings ranging from mild surprise to genuine embarrassment, or even a sense of betrayal by our own voice. The recorded voice forces us to confront an objective reality that conflicts with our subjective experience, often revealing a less idealized version of ourselves than we might prefer to believe. Beyond the physiological and psychological discrepancies, our discomfort with our recorded voice also stems from its role as a social mirror. When we hear ourselves speak in real time, our focus is primarily on the content of our message, the act of communication itself. We're engaged in the immediate back and forth of conversation, less concerned with the precise sonic qualities of our voice. However, a recording forces us into the role of an external listener, experiencing our voice as others do. This shift in perspective can be jarring because we suddenly become hyper-aware of aspects of our voice we usually ignore. Our accent, our pitch variations, speech impediments, verbal tics, or even the way we breathe. These are often features that we subconsciously monitor and adjust in social interactions, but hearing them objectively can feel like an unfiltered, raw assessment. This heightened self-consciousness is amplified by the inherent vulnerability of recorded sound. A live conversation is ephemeral, words spoken vanish quickly. A recording, however, is permanent. It's a preserved artifact of our vocal performance, open to repeated scrutiny, not just by ourselves, but potentially by others. This permanence adds a layer of pressure as any perceived flaw or imperfection becomes immortalized. We might suddenly become critical of our inflection, our choice of words, or even the underlying confidence or lack thereof conveyed in our tone. This externalized, permanent audit of our voice can be a profound exercise in self-judgment, revealing aspects of our vocal identity we might prefer to keep hidden or, at least, unexamined in such stark detail. It's a sudden, unavoidable encounter with our public vocal persona, stripped of the immediate context and subjective filters we usually employ. Our brains are constantly adapting and forming expectations about the world, including our own auditory feedback. When we speak, our brain anticipates the sound of our voice based on muscle movements in our vocal cords, tongue, and mouth, combined with the bone-conducted sound. This creates a feedback loop, allowing for real-time adjustments to pitch, volume, and articulation. This feed-forward mechanism is crucial for fluent speech and allows us to monitor and correct our vocal output almost instantly. However, this system is primarily optimized for live, internal monitoring. When we hear a recording, this adaptive loop is broken. The sound we hear is no longer directly linked to our current vocal production. Our brain receives an external signal that doesn't quite match the internal prediction or the current motor commands being sent to our vocal apparatus. This mismatch can be disorienting, disrupting the brain's finely tuned self-correction mechanisms. It's like trying to walk while seeing your legs move slightly out of sync in a video feed. Furthermore, our brains are remarkably efficient at filtering out redundant or predictable information. Because we hear our own voice constantly, our auditory system likely filters aspects of it, making us less consciously aware of its specific qualities in everyday speech. The recorded voice, however, presents this familiar sound in an unfamiliar context, stripping away these filters. It forces our brain to process it as novel external information, leading to a more critical and unvarnished assessment. This re-engagement of our auditory system, often combined with the lack of the familiar bone-conducted resonance, can make our recorded voice sound genuinely alien and less appealing than the filtered, internally resonant version we're accustomed to. While our initial reaction to our recorded voice is often negative, this aversion isn't necessarily permanent or immutable. Repeated exposure can desensitize us to the initial shock and lead to a more neutral or even accepting perception. Professional voice actors, broadcasters, and singers often spend extensive time listening to their own recordings, not just to critique, but to train their ears to the objective reality of their vocal output. For them, the recorded voice becomes a tool for improvement, a standard to measure against, rather than a source of discomfort. This process involves a cognitive reframing, where the brain gradually recalibrates its internal model to align more closely with the external reality. It's a learned skill, moving beyond the automatic physiological and psychological triggers of the uncanny valley. Moreover, the perception of our voice can also shift with self-acceptance. If we are generally comfortable with our identity, including our physical appearance and mannerisms, we are more likely to extend that acceptance to our voice. The discomfort often lessens as we mature and become more secure in who we are. Ultimately, the initial aversion to our recorded voice is a fascinating interplay of physics, psychology, and personal identity. It's a testament to how intricately linked our internal world is with our external sensory experiences. While it might always sound a little different than what we hear inside our own heads, understanding the mechanisms behind this difference can transform that initial cringe into a point of curious self-reflection and perhaps even a deeper appreciation for the unique instrument that is our own voice.